Francis Haugen, very good to see you here on Sky News tonight. Let's start first of all with it's almost the breaking news, the rebranding of Facebook's parent company as Meta. People saying, commentators saying, well, this is because, maybe the Facebook executives, Mark Zuckerberg, regards it as now toxified. Do you think you've been part of that process? Do you think you're partly the cause?
Well, there is a classic playbook in a crisis of you want to change the conversation. And the reality is that changing their name will not change the issues brought up in my disclosure or my testimony. I think there's a little bit of a meta issue here, which is Facebook over and over again has prioritized expansion and growth versus sticking the landing on what they already have. And I'm frankly shocked at a lot of the announcements, because if we had 10,000 engineers working on safety, like 10,000 new engineers, Facebook has the money to invest 10,000 new engineers in something, but they chose video games over genocide. I try not to criticize people's intentions. I focus more on systems, but I find the idea that you can invest 10,000 engineers in video games over genocide unconscionable.
OK, I've got to pick you up on genocide.
Yeah.
I mean, that is incredibly strong. I mean, the definition of genocide.
I'm aware.
I mean, how can you back that up?
Yeah. Well, Myanmar has been established as a genocide that was highly amplified and enabled by social media. In Ethiopia, there are 100 million people. It's a large country. There's an active ethnic violence incident happening right now that has been accredited to Facebook amplifying it and facilitating it. This is the beginning. Facebook's safety strategy, like Mark has written this down. You can go to 2018 and read his white papers. He says engagement-based ranking, prioritizing what you see based on what will provoke a reaction, is dangerous. Mark said it. It's dangerous because people are drawn to extreme content. But he also said, don't worry, we have AI. AI will save us. And Facebook's own documents say, at best, they can catch 10 to 20% of the bad content. And that's only when they support the language. And that's if they invest years more research, lots of more research. Right now, it's only 3 to 5% for hate speech. When you look at Ethiopia, there's 6 languages. How can a strategy based on fixing each language individually work? We need to make the platform safer. We need to slow it down. We need to make it human scale. Because in diverse, fragile places that are almost always linguistically diverse, Facebook's current strategy will not work.
But you know what Mark Zuckerberg also says about that very issue, about safety and security, that Facebook in 2021 alone spent $5 billion in that area. That's half as much as it is going to devote to the metaverse. I mean, that is an awful lot of money.
He's intending to spend $5 billion in the next year. The usual statistic they give is that they've invested $13 billion since 2016. So that works out to about, $2-ish billion a year. Facebook in the next year is on schedule to have a profit of like $45 billion, $50 billion, right? I think this question is not, should we have social media or should we not have social media? The question is, should Facebook be making me $50 billion a year when at least $1 billion and a half of its users basically don't have any safety systems?
They also say that that is more than any other tech company, that amount of money. Facebook invests far, far more than its competitors. Facebook,
I think this is something most people are not aware of. Facebook has subsidized the internet in a large number of countries in the world. Over 1 billion of their users have come in through having Facebook pay for their internet, but only if they use Facebook. So Facebook has bought their way into being the internet of some of the most fragile places in the world, and it's basically like stolen all the light for a free internet to grow. Facebook should have to spend the most of its competitors because it is the internet for the vast majority of languages in the world.
Let's talk about what you've been saying about the harms that Facebook and its outlets cause to, in particular, young people. Now, while you were giving evidence testimony to MPs here in London, there were demonstrators outside, I'm sure you're aware. They had an art installation. It was Mark Zuckerberg surfing over loads of money and saying...
It's a hydrofoil.
Yeah, hydrofoil, that's it, saying, I know we harm kids, but I don't care. Is that a populist way of summing up your charge against Facebook?
I cannot see into the hearts of men. Like, I have faith that Mark is a kind, conscientious person. I think it's more a question of Facebook's culture rewards expansion and growth, like their current pivot into video games when, like, they're not investing enough in safety. They care more about growing and expanding and focusing on the positive. And that's just a cultural problem. And so I don't think it's a thing of he doesn't care. It's that he sees the good he's doing and it allows him to ignore the bad.
That's very interesting. Just tell me about your motivation then. You talked there about Mark Zuckerberg. What about you, Frances Haugen? You're taking on one of the most powerful companies in the history of the planet. No doubt there's some personal cost to you, but what motivated you to take that step?
I think very reasonable people can look at a situation where their actions would save a life and say, I'm not willing to accept those costs, right? Like that's not the burden that I want to take on. But if the number of lives you thought you could save was 10 or 100 or 1,000, I think that would change a lot of people's calculus. I am an algorithmic specialist. I have seen how misinformation is spreading in the vast majority of the world and how it divides and polarizes us. And I earnestly believe that there might be 1 million or 10 million lives on the line in the next 20 years. And there is almost nothing I can imagine that could happen to me that is more important or like worse than having that many people come to harm.
You personalised that, didn't you? I know while you've been in the United Kingdom, you met Molly Russell's father. I mean, she's a 14-year-old girl who committed suicide, her family say, because of some of the material that was posted about her on Instagram. Is that your justification for doing this?
I was originally motivated more by the global south, that I feel like the ethnic violence we're seeing right now in Ethiopia is just the first chapter, the second chapter. Myanmar is really the first chapter in a novel that is going to be horrific. But here at home, things like Molly Russell are about the suffering of children. Engagement-based ranking, the way Facebook prioritizes that content, basically scans you and says, what are you most vulnerable to? What rabbit hole can we pull you down? And for a child who might be getting bullied, a child who might be experiencing doubts about themselves as they mature, that can lead very rapidly to self-harm content, to eating disorder content, because it's so attractive, it's addictive.
And there's some so troubling is not the right word, it's stronger than that, statistics, aren't there? 32% of girls said that they felt worse about themselves after being on Instagram. 13.5% of British teens said they had suicidal thoughts. They were more frequent after some of the material that they'd been accessing. Is that another reason why?
Certainly. Like Facebook's own studies have shown that you can take a brand new account, it has no friends, it has no interests, and follow very mild interests like healthy eating. And because these algorithms amplify and suck you down rabbit holes, just by clicking on the content Facebook presents to you, you will get led to anorexia content rapidly. And that's because these algorithms, it's not bad content or bad people, it's the algorithms in the system that amplify these interests that's dangerous.
But the worst thing that you're asserting, because you've worked on the inside, is these things are happening, but that Facebook knows about it, knows about the harms that are being caused, and makes a judgment. Makes a judgment that we will continue to monetize this kind of content rather than remove it.
Facebook is a deep believer in flatness, right? Like social media is flat. Facebook has the largest open floor plan office in the world. It's 1/4 mile long, one room, 5,000 people. Worked before COVID. They don't want to acknowledge that they have power, like it's foreign to them. They believe everything is flat, everyone is equal. They don't want to acknowledge that they have power, and because they won't acknowledge that, they can't acknowledge responsibility. And I think it's much easier for them to divert their eyes and focus on the good they cause than be able to have that awakening and that reckoning that they are responsible for these harms.
How do you answer, I mean, it is a charge made against you. You've been talking to lawmakers in the United States, in the United Kingdom, to politicians, and it's your own constitution, the First Amendment, about freedom of speech and saying, well, this is a modern version of that, allowing people to communicate directly to each other. And politicians always like to intervene and control. Way back hundreds of years ago when newspapers first started, they started taxing them to prevent people being able to communicate with each other. When television came along, they put in rules and regulations to control that. Now we've got the 21st century version of that. You are enabling politicians who want to stop people organising and talking amongst themselves.
So one of the greatest mischaracterizations of me online is that I am like a dark horse for censorship. So like I talked about earlier, about the idea that the world is very linguistically diverse, the fragilest places are linguistically diverse. They speak different languages in singular societies. I am strongly against us having systems that pick good and bad ideas because they do not scale and they do not work. The thing I'm actually advocating for is less control over what people say, but systems that are safer. So I'll give you an example. Twitter requires you to click on a link before you reshare it. Have you been oppressed by having to click on that link before you reshare it? I don't think so. Or like reshare chains. Let's imagine Alice writes something, Bob reshares it, Carol reshares it, it lands in Dan's newsfeed. If he had to copy and paste it to reshare it, has he been oppressed? No, but that has the same impact as the entire third-party fact-checking program. Safer design choices is the solution, not picking good and bad content. And Facebook doesn't want to give up the growth and profits it gets from these choices.
So if Facebook doesn't do that itself...
It doesn't do it.
Well, if it doesn't do that, then does it need either to be broken up and or have an oversight board, an independent oversight board to make it do those things?
I think we need regulation from places like the UK because Facebook right now has no incentive to actually do accurate risk assessments, right? Like I'm concerned that because of this disclosure, they're going to not stop asking hard questions.
Who should be on those oversight boards? That is the worry that people get to decide then what other people can share amongst themselves.
Well, I think concepts of risk assessments are if you say you need to articulate the risks so people can choose whether or not to use your products. Because right now you're saying you do things that you don't do, right? You say you support 50 languages, but most of those languages don't have most of the safety systems. We need to have, you should have to articulate what you actually are, and you should have to yourself come up with solutions. And you should have to let the public know all those things. Because right now, like, people don't know what the problems are, and they don't know that Facebook's not working on them. And so I think systems like that are flexible. They're not about choosing good and bad ideas, but they're about making sure that Facebook is engaging in a responsible and transparent way with the public.
And I know people will want to know this. It's the obvious question, but I'm interested in it too. Frances Haugen, are you still on any of the Facebook platforms? Are you on Facebook? Are you on Instagram? You use WhatsApp?
I am. I actually really love Facebook. I love social media. Like, I've worked at 4 social media companies. You have to understand. I want safe social media, and I think we can have social media that is safe, that we enjoy, but it has to be human scale. Right now, I have a Facebook account, but I'm scared to post on it because I think they're going to delete it. Like, I'm worried that if I put more content on it, they're going to just, because they've taken it away from other researchers before. And so I assume when the media comes down, they're going to delete my account, but we'll see. But I do have an Instagram account, and we're using that because we want to give people a little peek into the process of reform. And so Twitter will be about our ideas, and Instagram is going to be about, like, letting you see a little peek into what's going on.
And just finally, let's come full circle then on the metaverse. I mean, you kicked off this interview by accusing Facebook of enabling genocide in some countries in the world. What do you think then about the ambition here to move into this metaverse as they describe it, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, to own that future?
I am frankly shocked about this announcement because I think people aren't aware of this, and this is a really important thing to help get out there. In order to make the metaverse happen, we have to put Facebook's microphones and their sensors in our homes, in our offices. Like, you're going to walk into an office building and it's going to be full of Facebook sensors listening to you. Facebook has demonstrated over and over again that they are not transparent. They don't tell us what they actually do. And when we ask them, they actively lie to us. Why would we want their microphones and sensors in our homes? It's crazy. But, I embrace ambition. I wish him the best of luck, and I hope he's responsible with it.
Frances Haugen, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Well, a fascinating interview, and in response to those remarks made by Frances Haugen about Facebook's role in Myanmar and Ethiopia, Meta, the new parent company of Facebook, gave us the following statement. In the last 2 years, we've hired more people with language, country and topic expertise. We've also increased the number of team members with work experience in Myanmar and Ethiopia to include former humanitarian aid workers, crisis responders and policy specialists. And we've hired more people who can review content in Amharic, Oromo, Tigrinya, Somali and Burmese. Adding more language expertise has been a key focus area for us. This year alone, we've hired content reviewers in 12 new languages. Facebook's approach in Myanmar today is fundamentally different from what it was in 2017, and allegations that we have not invested in safety and security in the country are wrong. We conducted human rights due diligence to understand and address the risks in Myanmar, built a dedicated team of Burmese speakers, banned the Tatmadaw and used technology to reduce the prevalence of violating content in Myanmar, including proactively detecting 99% of the hate speech we remove before it's reported to us.